السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نستأنف الآن ما تبقى من الجلسة الأولى بمحاضرتين، الأولى بعنوان المعايير الدولية، التعاون والانعكاسات الاقتصادية. يلقي هذه الكلمة السيد صامويل لوكاس من أستراليا. الكلمة الثانية ستكون بعنوان برنامج الإيكاو للتدقيق العالمي على أمن الطيران، يلقيها السيد محمد جميل المرابحة من المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية. يسرني فيما يلي تقديم نبذة مختصرة عن متحدثنا الأول. قبل تقديم هذه النسخة أيها الإخوة، أود أن أنوه أن هناك أجهزة سماعات للترجمة الفورية موجودة في ركن القاعة، فأي شخص يحتاج لهذه السماعات الرجاء التفضل مشكورا باستلام السماعة لمساعدته في عملية الترجمة الفورية. السيد صامويل لوكاس هو مدير عام مفاوضات الخدمات الجوية في وزارة النقل والبنية التحتية الأسترالية. تم اختياره لرئاسة فريق خبراء تسهيلات النقل الجوي التابع لمنظمة الطيران المدني الدولي الإيكاو في دورته الحالية. السيد لوكاس لديه خبرة كبيرة في كافة شؤون الطيران وصناعة النقل الجوي، وقد تقلد عدة مناصب في وزارة النقل والبنية التحتية الأسترالية، بما فيها إدارة الشؤون القانونية، حيث يحمل مؤهلات عليا في القانون من جامعة كوينزلاند ومن الجامعة الوطنية الأسترالية. عمل أيضاً في القطاع الخاص في دولة كندا في مجال الاستشارات القانونية، وكذلك في مجال محطات النقل، في مجال إدارة محطات النقل البحري. أشكر السيد صامويل لوكاس على حضوره، وأدعوه الآن لإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging His Highness Prince Fahad bin Abdullah Al Saud, President of the General Authority of Civil Aviation and patron of this conference, for hosting the conference and for the kind invitation to speak. There is no doubt that aviation security represents one of the biggest policy and operational challenges undertaken in the aviation industry. My approach to these issues today may be slightly different from other speakers at the conference, as I come to this topic not from an aviation security perspective, but from an air transport and facilitation perspective. The key challenge for aviation security is to protect transport systems without hindering the efficient movement of goods and people, with growth in aviation and a dynamic security environment, resulting in current systems and processes struggling at times with increased demand for air travel. This year, at the 6th Worldwide Air Transport convened by ICAO in Montreal, the President of the Council of ICAO, Mr. Roberto Cobe Gonzalez, spoke about the need for the overall sustainability of the air transport industry. This requires, according to the President, safe and secure and environmentally friendly operations for both passengers and cargo traffic that provide airlines, airports, air navigation service providers and other partners of the air transport value chain with a reasonable expectation of profitability. The aviation industry is vital for trade, tourism, people-to-people links, and for fostering development around the world. With IATA forecasting industry net profit to be around 1.3% in 2013, and airlines alone spending some $8.5 billion per year on aviation security measures, current security practices significantly impact industry sustainability and could have other unintended effects. Noting the importance of an effective aviation security regime, governments and international bodies often create regulation without a full understanding of the economic impacts on industry. Aviation security represents a difficult situation, with much of the regulation implemented in response to the various worldwide security-related incidents that have taken place in recent years. Isolation, in thinking or in practice, is the enemy of the proactive system that is needed by the international aviation industry. Today, I will be discussing three main topics: the importance of international standards, particularly in relation to facilitation, the need for international engagement in the international aviation security system, and the need for engagement on a national level. Two main themes sit behind these issues. Firstly, the need for greater harmonisation and best practice, and secondly, the economic impact of these policies on the aviation industry. Within the international civil aviation system, created by the Chicago Convention and is administered by ICAO, a range of standards and recommended practices apply to aviation security as set out in Annex 17 on aviation security and Annex 9 on facilitation. As most of you are familiar, standards are binding requirements on states to do or not do certain things. Facilitation SARPs, for those of you who may not be so familiar with Annex 9, cover a range of things: visas, passports, unruly passengers, advanced passenger information and passenger name record systems, disability access, and health issues, to mention just a few. The considerations of security and facilitation need to be intertwined. It is not possible to consider one without considering the other. It's therefore imperative that regulators and government policymakers bear both sets of standards and recommended practices in mind when considering security or facilitation issues. In support of this, the ICAO facilitation plans to pursue closer cooperation between the facilitation panel and the aviation security panel to enable better alignment of facilitation and aviation security outcomes within the ICAO context. A concrete example of this, arising from last year's facilitation panel meeting, was the initiative taken by the FAL panel to refer several proposed standards and recommended practices to the AVSEC panel for comment to ensure consistency in the approaches being taken in the different panels. Many of you here will be familiar with the Universal Security Audit process. The compliance picture in relation to facilitation standards is frankly not good. More than half of the ICAO member states audited do not have policies in place to require close cooperation between their civil aviation and facilitation programs. 77% of states do not have a national facilitation program in place. These two requirements are essential to ensure close cooperation on a national level between security, facilitation, and industry stakeholders. As the FAL panel looks into these issues of non-compliance as part of its program in the next triennium, it will be very interesting to discover the reasons behind this non-compliance, which may be due to conflicts with security requirements, to a lack of appropriate supporting and effective guidance material, and, being realistic, to the inability of states to keep up with the continual development of new standards and recommended practices. Non-compliance with ICAO SARPs is a key hindrance to an effective and sustainable air transport sector. The aviation sector and government in particular need to closely examine their compliance with ICAO SARPs in pursuit of an effective and sustainable air transport system. A proactive international system that encourages and supports compliance with international standards and recommended practices is essential for the orderly and secure development of international air transport. That requires states to do their part on their own work, and it also requires cooperation within the international system. And to that end, the facilitation panel will be tackling new and emerging issues such as automated border processing and the use of advanced passenger information and passenger name record data. International cooperation between states is a key aspect of improving aviation security, both within the context of ICAO and other multilateral groups, but also bilateral cooperation between states. Australia has pursued a comprehensive program of international aviation security engagement, particularly in the Asian, South Pacific and most recently Middle Eastern regions. The Australian Government identifies opportunities to support fellow regulatory authorities within the region by implementing capacity-building projects that enhance their ability to provide oversight of their civil aviation sector. We also work closely with collaborative partners within industry and other governments to promote the sharing of best practice models in the achievement of aviation security and facilitation outcomes. For Australia, our engagement in the South Pacific region is key. Pacific Island countries are some of the world's most reliant upon civil aviation for economic and social development through travel, trade and tourism. At the same time, many have limited resources to dedicate to internationally driven requirements relating to aviation security. States will necessarily focus their international engagement on their immediate geographic regions, but with the changing dynamics of the global aviation market, we all need to reassess and realign our priorities from time to time. For Australia, the growth of our air links with the Middle Eastern region has meant that over the last 20 years, the Middle East region has become more important than ever before for us in our aviation linkages and in our international engagement. But international engagement is not just about theory. It's also an important tool in, for example, rolling out of new technology. In the facilitation field, for example, Australia and New Zealand have both deployed the same automated border processing technology in the form of SmartGate. As of next year, once all Australian passport holders have been moved onto e-passports, Australia will have the ability to ensure that all Australian nationals entering the country are able to do so through a self-processing system through our SmartGate mechanisms. The next step is integration with our bilateral partner New Zealand, and we are working with them on new ways to integrate our border processes with a view to eventually eliminating touch points in the travel process. In pursuing this, we're not unique. A number of countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council region have also implemented e-gates at various international airports, streamlining processes for GCC nationals. The growth in automated border processing has put this issue on the agenda of the facilitation panel and other international bodies. And it's one of the emerging issues that the international community needs to cooperate in order to ensure that we achieve the maximum degree of benefit from the deployment of this new technology. The international regime for liquids, aerosols and gels screening is a good example of a complex regime that, frankly, would benefit from harmonisation and cooperation across the international community. Australia has been part of this, conducting a trial of liquid-based explosive detection systems with the United States and United Kingdom. Equipment capable of detecting liquid-based explosives, some of the risks that were highlighted by John Pistol this morning, were incorporated into security screening lanes at trial airports. The trial enabled significant data to be collected regarding the performance and accuracy of these methods and data regarding the impact on passenger facilitation. Today, Australia has now deployed limited lag screening technology at some of our airports, particularly for transit passengers. This represents an important step towards the refinement of the very unpopular, but from an aviation security perspective, very important restriction on liquids, aerosols and gels. Overall, from an Australian perspective, international engagement on aviation security issues and facilitation issues has been worthwhile and resulted in many productive outcomes. At the national level within states, an effective aviation security system requires a cooperative relationship between all participants across the aviation sector. This cooperation should include security regulators, airlines, airports, but also the broader travel and tourism sector. The Australian Government convenes a number of national-level forums to discuss aviation security issues. These are attended by a wide range of industry stakeholders and provide the opportunity to discuss and contribute to various aviation security issues and operational, regulatory and policy matters. For an effective system, widespread government and international cooperation should extend to the field of facilitation. Effective participation of security agencies in states' national facilitation committees is key to balancing security and facilitation objectives. In accordance with the SARPs in Annex 9, Australia convenes a National Passenger Facilitation Committee with representation from government and industry stakeholders holding an interest in facilitation issues, and we include in this security agencies. Australia's experience with our National Passenger Facilitation Committee is that a robust and ongoing discussion between stakeholders in the airport process, including aviation security agencies, is a key plank in ensuring an effective aviation framework. When developing new aviation security policy, principles of best practice regulation, including regulatory impact assessments, should be part of the aviation security regulation system. By utilising principles of best practice regulation, the Australian Government can effectively support facilitation outcomes whilst appropriately addressing security concerns. Balancing facilitation and aviation security does not mean that security requirements should never have an impact on facilitation, but it does mean that states need to fully consider all of these relevant considerations and be prepared to have, at times, uncomfortable discussions when they consider these issues. A good example is the introduction of new technology. While new technology has the ability to improve facilitation and security outcomes, some of the issues can be quite controversial. For example, full-body scanners. The Australian Government deployed full-body scanners at Australia's 8 largest international airports in 2012. Prior to the implementation, the Government conducted an extensive and thorough industry and community consultation process to ensure that privacy concerns were fully explored and interested groups and organisations had the opportunity to participate in the policy dialogue. The discussion was held in both the security and facilitation contexts and also included a wide range of community groups. The successful implementation of our body scanner rollout was as much about the stakeholder engagement process with the full range of stakeholders, not just security stakeholders, as it was about rolling out new technological equipment. My message on national engagement overall is that proper engagement and collaboration across the full breadth of industry and government delivers outcomes. We all need to think outside the small boxes in which we work on a day-to-day basis and see the air transport chain in its full scale. As I began this morning, I highlighted the economic impacts of aviation security, and I wanted to return to that point as I near the end of this discussion. This year, more than 3 billion people will travel by air, and they are all screened to the same standard, even though the vast majority actually posed no security risk at all. Industry forecasts predict a doubling in worldwide air traffic to more than 6 billion passengers per year by 2030, with airport security screening needing to consider better strategies and technologies in order to accommodate the predicted growth or risk stifling air travel with outdated airport security practices. One could observe, as has been suggested this morning, that screening all passengers to the same standard is an ineffective use of resources. Australia is currently considering a move to a risk-based approach to screening passengers. Recognising the differing levels of passenger risk, work is being undertaken to investigate and consult industry on the best way to do this and on potential models for a risk-based approach to screening at Australian airports. As we do this, we are carefully weighing the experience of the United States and other countries that are already moving in this direction. I'd also like to acknowledge, as we discuss these issues, the work that has been done by IATA on the development of its concept of the checkpoint of the future. While there are significant challenges in implementing such a proposal, ICAO's efforts are to be commended, and the international community should draw several important things from IATA's proposal. Firstly, and in particular, I would emphasise the need to consider the goals of the checkpoint of the future process and commend them to everyone's consideration. The three goals of strengthened security, increased operational efficiency, and an improved passenger experience are goals that should be in the forefront of the mind of everyone involved in the airport process, be it from a security, facilitation, or industry-driven perspective. In conclusion, aside from publicising the work of the ICAO Facilitation Panel to the aviation security community, a job I always relish and am always pleased to undertake, I've sought to emphasise today the broad context of the industry as a whole, within which aviation security is one element of the chain that needs to be considered. I have highlighted that collaboration and consultation on a national and international level and best practice regulation that properly considers the full impact of decisions delivers better security and facilitation outcomes for the industry. In its simplest form, my final message, ladies and gentlemen, is this. All of us involved in regulation and policy setting for the aviation industry need to remember that we are each, in our own way, just one small cog in a giant machine. There is a broader context to everything that we do. A failure to appreciate this leads to poor policy and regulatory decisions by government, commercial losses in the industry, decreased passenger and consumer satisfaction, and overall, we as a global society miss out on the benefits that aviation is able to deliver. I hope I have finished this morning with enough time to stimulate some further discussion and questions, and I'd welcome further discussion on these issues either here or afterwards, as we can have further discussions in the margins of the meeting. Yeah.
أشكر السيد سامويل لوكاس على كل هذه المعلومات القيمة، والآن المجال مفتوح لطرح أي أسئلة. تفضل. ما في مايك؟ هنا المايك.
Just my question for you is that now for the body scanners and this kind of things, I think this issue was controversial in the US and the Western people. How can you adopt this here in the KSA with all the culture and the religious differences without minimizing the security risk that we are taking for that matter?
ممكن مايك شغال؟
I understand that the question there was around the application of a risk-based security approach in, for example, the Kingdom here. My observation there would be that it is very important that government regulators in approaching issues like risk-based security need to remember that it needs to be based on proper risks, not on superficial considerations. It needs to be driven not by perceptions that particular nationalities will be a security risk, but needs to be driven by intelligence-driven ideas and some of the concepts that were being highlighted by Mr. Pistol this morning. I think the key message there is that in tackling this, as so many other issues, governments need to ensure that they go down a proper road of consultation and collaborative development of their systems and of their policies and approaches, so that there is proper understanding and acceptance by the community of what they will be undertaking.
أي سؤال آخر؟